She doesn't miss you. She misses the version of herself that existed when you made her feel alive. That line alone divides the world into two kinds of men. Those who chase ghosts and those who learn to understand the machinery behind them. Because what she truly misses isn't you. It's the state her nervous system entered when you became her mirror. When your presence reflected back to her, the illusion of being desired, chosen, seen. And when that reflection vanished, her mind began its descent, a slow withdrawal from the chemical dream she mistook for love. You see, what she calls missing you isn't nostalgia. It's biology remembering a high. It's her nervous system scratching at the locked door of a lost stimulation. Every woman's mind carries this ancient circuitry, a primal loop that ties emotion to survival. And when a man triggers that circuitry, he becomes more than just a person. He becomes an experience, a drug wrapped in a heartbeat, a mirror she cannot put down, even when it burns her to look at it. So what happens inside her mind when pain becomes the only proof she ever felt something real? The answer is simple and brutal. Her brain refuses to let go because to let go would mean facing the emptiness that existed before you. It would mean returning to a baseline where she is no longer special, no longer chosen, no longer high. And the mind, like any addict, will do anything to avoid that fall. She replays the messages you never sent. She rewrites the endings you never promised. She romanticizes your absence until it becomes a shrine. Each memory turns into a ritual. Each silence becomes a trigger. Each what-if becomes a chemical drip of dopamine disguised as hope. That is how the trap begins. You think she moved on. You think her new smile means she forgot. But what you're seeing isn't healing. It's substitution. She's looking for the same neurochemical signature in someone else. She's not looking for love. She's searching for that specific pattern of uncertainty. That oscillation between being wanted and almost losing it. That sharp edge between pleasure and pain that you carved into her. Because every woman gets hooked not on the man, but on the emotional contrast he creates. When you were warm, she opened. When you went cold, she froze and then begged to feel again. Each cycle etched deeper into her mind a neurological map that points back to you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were unpredictable. Not because you loved her, but because you made her feel something she couldn't control. That is why when she says, "I can't stop thinking about him," what she really means is, "I can't stop thinking about how I felt when I was with him." You became a pattern, a sequence of emotional spikes and crashes. And the brain always returns to the pattern it associates with aliveness. In this moment, somewhere in her mind, you still exist, not as a person, but as an unresolved loop. And that loop feeds on uncertainty. The less you give, the louder it grows. That is why silence is so powerful. Because silence starves logic and amplifies emotion. It turns the absence of information into the presence of imagination. And imagination, when fueled by longing, becomes obsession. This is why your withdrawal feels like gravity. Why every step you take away pulls her further in. Because the female brain doesn't just crave love, it craves the restoration of emotional equilibrium. And when that equilibrium is lost because of you, you become the only perceived cure. Understand this. When she says you broke her heart, what she means is that you interrupted her identity. You disrupted the story she told herself about who she was when she was desired by you. You became the variable that defined her self-worth. Remove the variable and her ego collapses into the void of uncertainty. So she keeps running circles around your ghost trying to find herself again in your reflection. But the mirror is gone. And that absence, that unfillable space is what keeps the addiction alive. Most men never see this. They mistake her tears for love. They mistake her silence for indifference. They think walking away is the end. It isn't. It's the beginning of the loop, the first withdrawal. When you left, her brain went into survival mode. It began to crave the emotional chaos you represented. Because chaos feels like life to a nervous system addicted to intensity. You became her storm. And calmness feels like death after that. That's why she might check your profile at 2 a.m. That's why she compares every new man to you, even while swearing she's over you. That's why she tells herself she hates you, yet keeps returning to the same memory that hurts her most. Hate in her mind is not the opposite of love. It's the last remaining tether to meaning, because indifference would mean the story is truly over. And the addicted brain cannot stand closure. So she feeds the pain. She waters the wound. She keeps it open because it's the only thing that reminds her she once felt alive. That is the hidden tragedy. That is the loop. You were not her lover. You were her mirror. You showed her a version of herself that glowed under your gaze. And now that gaze is gone. She's chasing the ghost of her own reflection. But here's the truth that most men never grasp. The same mechanism that makes her obsessed can make you free. Because once you understand that she's not addicted to you, but to the feeling you represented, you stop personalizing her attachment. You stop trying to fix her perception of you. You stop trying to compete with the illusion she built around your absence. You begin to see her behavior not as love, but as withdrawal, not as affection, but as a symptom. And once you see it, you no longer react. That's when everything shifts, because obsession feeds on reaction. Without your energy to sustain it, the loop collapses, and in its silence, she will begin to hear something new. The echo of her own void. That's when she realizes she was never chasing you. She was chasing the reflection of herself that only existed in your presence. Now you understand why so many women never truly let go. Because they are not losing a man. They are losing a mirror. And that mirror once told them, I exist. I am wanted. I am alive. So when it disappears, they don't grieve the man. They grieve the version of themselves that could still feel. Don't skip this truth. Because most men never recover after misunderstanding it. They keep chasing closure. They keep trying to heal her pain. They keep trying to win back a woman who's really chasing a chemical, not a connection. But you're not here to be her cure. You're here to understand the mechanism. Because once you understand it, you are no longer part of the trap. You are the one who sees it. And that sight, cold, clear, merciless, is where power begins. You're about to learn how that hidden mechanism forms, how her brain confuses uncertainty for desire, how your absence becomes her craving, and how, without saying a word, you become the gravity she orbits around. So listen carefully, because this is where the illusion starts to break. Next, the hidden trigger where emotion becomes addiction and attention becomes control. Part 1, the hidden trigger. She never fell for you. She fell into the pattern you created. You believe attraction is a spark. It isn't. It is a sequence. It is repetition arranged to feel inevitable. The same way tides appear magical to the one who has never studied the moon. You thought it was chemistry. It was conditioning. Emotion in the female psyche is not a random storm. It is a weather system with pressure fronts, with hot and cold currents, with predictable collisions that look like fate to men who refuse to learn maps. Her feelings did not arrive uninvited. They were named and colored by sensation. Touch, tone, timing, presence, absence, return. Every variable a lever. Every lever a message to the nervous system. Approach, hold, doubt, chase. A man becomes a hook when he unintentionally engineers oscillation. A surge of closeness, then a cut of distance. A look that opens the body, then a silence that tightens the chest. A confession that warms the room, followed by a retreat that makes the walls breathe cold. Up, down, warm, cold. Yes, maybe. Not love. Calibration. You did not plan it, but your rhythm carved grooves in her attention. Each small inconsistency taught the brain to lean forward. Each withheld answer taught the body to guess. Guessing is not passive. It is energetic. It releases chemicals. It entrenches memory. It forges symbolic meaning from scraps. She began to assign significance to what was ordinary and power to what was absent. Your silence was never empty. It was full of her projections. And projection, as Freud mapped and Jung refined, is the oldest magic of the mind. A way of turning one's own longing into an outer God. This is the mechanism. One moment you are near, the next you recede. Her senses like a vigilant animal track the gap. The body hates unanswered questions more than it hates pain. So it floods her with dopamine the instant the pattern hints at resolution. A message arrives. A glance lingers. A door that was closed opens half an inch. Relief. The nervous system registers victory. But the victory is never complete. The game resets. The loop deepens. Understand the neuroeconomy beneath this dance. Dopamine does not reward possession. It rewards pursuit. It is a currency minted by anticipation, amplified by uncertainty, taxed by delay, spent in the instant of near arrival. If you give her constancy, the system adapts and quiets. If you give her intermittence, ambivalent warmth, unpredictable availability, the system escalates and binds. Remember this, stability doesn't create obsession. Intermittence does. This does not make you cruel by default. Cruelty requires intent. But power ignores intent. A hidden trigger is still a trigger even when the finger is asleep. When your rhythm becomes erratic, the structure of her attachment tilts toward compulsion. Kierkegaard would point to the dizziness of freedom. How possibility overwhelms and faith clings to an object. Schopenhauer would name the will blind, restless, aching toward what recedes. Machiavelli would observe the political consequence. Scarcity breeds value. Different languages for the same geometry. The mind worships what withholds. Consider the micro-movements that trained her. You answered at midnight twice. When the world was quiet and fantasy could breathe. You looked away mid-conversation, not to punish, but because your thoughts drifted. The body recorded it as lack. You cancelled once because of work. She filed it under danger. Then you appeared with absolute presence, an hour that felt like sanctuary. The system locked the contrast into memory. Danger, rescue, winter, fire. Your inconsistency became the architecture of meaning. And meaning, not romance, is what the female psyche chases when attachment is young and unstable. She does not crave your certainty. She craves the end of suspense. She does not pursue your body. She pursues the closure you keep almost giving. Each near resolution lights up her reward circuitry. Each delay multiplies the imagined payoff. In economics, this is called variable ratio reinforcement. The schedule that builds casinos and keeps them alive. In psychology, it is the intermittent bond. The schedule that builds obsessions and calls them soulmates. Notice her language when the hook has set. She says, I feel like I'm losing him even when you are in the same room. She says, I don't know where I stand even after a night that felt like truth. She says, I just need clarity. And then refuses the clarity when it costs her the high because clarity closes the loop and closure starves the very chemistry that makes you luminous. A paradox emerges. The more you reassure, the more the system adapts, the more you fade into normal light. The more you oscillate, the more the system sensitizes, the brighter you burn in her mind. Addiction is clarity inverted. It replaces the straight line with a maze and convinces the walker that the maze is sacred. Aristotle spoke of habit as second nature. Here the habit is emotional. You have trained her courage to tremble at your distance and trained her hope to spring at your return. Courage and hope are noble words. Here they are simply levers on a slot machine. Pull, pause, reward, reset. What you call passion may be nothing more than a schedule. You must also see the ethical edge. There is a difference between choosing gravity and manipulating it. Power that requires deception rots both holder and held. The axis is not a set of tricks. It is a refusal to self-abandon. Dominate yourself first. Your impulses, your need to be worshipped, your fear of being ordinary. Or you will confuse dependence with devotion and call it victory. The hidden trigger then is not a magic phrase or staged delay. It is the structure of your presence. It is how you sit inside your own life. If your attention is not owned by the moment, it will be rented by drama. If your boundaries are fog, the wind will teach you to chase. And if you cannot stand still in discomfort, you will offer intermittent relief to the discomfort in others simply to silence your own. Women sense this before they can name it. A man who can hold a pause without apologizing alters the field. A man who can listen without rushing to repair teaches the nervous system a new tempo. A man who can walk away without broadcasting the departure turns scarcity from theater into truth. These behaviors do not hook by trickery. They hook by contrast with the ordinary noise of needy men. They announce without words. I am not food. I am fire. Approach with respect or not at all. Notice what happens in her body when you stop filling empty space with explanations. Silence becomes a canvas. She paints on it with memory. Distance becomes a mirror. She looks into it and sees either her doubt or her dignity. If she chooses doubt, the cycle sharpens. If she chooses dignity, the cycle dissolves. Either path reveals the same foundation. The trigger lives in the pattern, not in the promise. There is a primitive algorithm running beneath her language. Input attention. Delay uncertainty. Output meaning. Meaning converts into attachment. Attachment under intermittence converts into compulsion. Compulsion searches for ritual. Ritual repeats the pattern. The loop closes and deepens. This explains the strange intensity of trivial artifacts. A song you sent becomes sacred. A place you visited becomes haunted. A phrase you repeat becomes a charm she hears in other mouths and hates for wearing your shape. These are not romantic relics. They are neurochemical bookmarks. They mark the pages where the reward spiked. They are coordinates to earlier highs. Nietzsche warned about staring into abysses. Here the abyss is the gap between your warmth and your withdrawal. Stare long enough and the gap stares back as destiny. But destiny is only a pattern that refuses to name itself. Name it and it becomes a mechanism. Name it and you can stand outside it like an engineer stepping back from the engine to study the belts and pulleys rather than riding them until the machine breaks. The modern man fails here. He thinks the answer is more effort, more messages, more presence, more proving. He pours certainty into a vessel designed to drink suspense. The result is predictable. Respect declines. Mystique evaporates. Attraction flattens into obligation. He confuses safety with seduction and wonders why gratitude never turns into desire. The antidote is not cruelty or manipulation. The antidote is equilibrium. Yours. Own your rhythm. Mean your yes. Honor your no. Allow your absence. Let your presence be full, not frequent. Let your words be measured, not rationed. Let your attention be sovereign, not for sale. This consistency of self removes the need for inconsistency of behavior. It is the clean paradox. The steadier your axis, the stronger your gravity. But because you are not performing scarcity, your gravity does not rot into games. Still, do not deny what has already been set in motion. If you have trained a woman's nervous system to equate you with intermittence, your steadiness will first feel like loss. She will test. She will provoke the old rhythm to see if the machine still pays out. Do not re-enter the maze to prove that you've left it. Stand. Let the pattern starve. Compulsion dies the moment it cannot find a lever to pull. You might ask, if the hook requires intermittence, why do so many women stay with men who are consistently unkind? Because the predictably unkind are not consistent. They are consistently wounding. Even cruelty has its own oscillation. Hurt, balm, guilt, reprieve. The brain will chase reprieve even from the hand that causes the harm. This is not romance. It is captivity. Do not build your house in that swamp and call it a citadel. The hidden trigger is a mirror turned toward you. It forces the question, what pattern are you creating when you do nothing at all? Your pace, your schedule, your silences, your small returns. Together, they are a metronome she dances to in the dark. If the beat is erratic, the dance becomes frantic. If the beat is sovereign, the dance becomes selective. You do not lure, you allow. You do not coax, you choose. From this posture, attraction ceases to be a hunt and becomes an orbit. Those calibrated to your gravity remain. And those addicted to chaos spin away looking for a storm. There is one more layer. The hook is not only emotional, it is symbolic. To the female imagination, a man becomes an emblem of a larger law. If you embody expansion, she feels future. If you embody boundary, she feels protection. If you embody absence and return, she feels fate. Fate is a dangerous perfume. It smells like meaning distilled to a single name. When she inhales it, she calls it destiny. When you recognize it, you call it schedule. So, you will stop pretending that her attachment is a testament to your essence. It is a testament to the pattern. Stop polishing your persona and study your tempo. Stop asking how to be more impressive and learn how to be less available to your own impulses. Stop making grand gestures and start honoring small gates, when to answer, when to pause, when to leave a question unanswered because the truth is not ready to be spoken. If you master anything, master the pause. A clean pause is different from a punitive silence. Punitive silence punishes to control. A clean pause respects time, respects thought, respects the sovereignty of two lives that refuse to devour one another to prove closeness. In a clean pause, her anxiety will either mature into patience or metabolize into departure. Both outcomes are merciful. Both outcomes reveal what was real beneath the chemistry. She never fell for you. She fell into the pattern you created. Now you see the blueprint of that pattern. How excitement braided with uncertainty binds tighter than certainty alone. Now you see why each time you went quiet, she felt you drift across the horizon. And why each time you returned, dopamine sang a bright lie in her chest. Not love, conditioning. Remember this, stability doesn't create obsession. Intermittence does. But obsession is not the prize. It is the tax you pay when you outsource meaning to volatility. Refuse the tax. Choose the axis. And once you see the trigger, you will notice its ink on everything. The way she watches the door when you stand to leave, the way her voice climbs when you say you might be busy, the way a single late reply can resurrect 1,000 fragile hopes. The pattern is not mystical anymore. It is mechanical, and mechanics can be changed. You are ready for the next stratum of the machine. How a pattern becomes a brand burned into the nervous system. How an evening becomes a signature. How a silence becomes a seal. This is the threshold where memory stops being a file in the mind and becomes a texture in the body. Cross it and you will understand why she can forget your words and never shake your weather. Next, the emotional imprint, where feeling becomes memory and memory becomes law. Part 2, the emotional imprint. You weren't her type. You became her pattern. There was a time she would have sworn she knew what she wanted. A certain look, a tone, a kind of man. But attraction is not a checklist. It is an imprint. The body keeps a record that the mind cannot edit. And once a feeling leaves its mark, logic becomes decoration. She didn't fall for your words. She fell for the chemical signature your presence released inside her. It began quietly. A glance, a pause, the rhythm of a breath that didn't belong to her, but shaped the way hers moved. She didn't notice it then. No one ever does at the start of a loop. Every exchange writes a small note in the nervous system. The mind forgets the sentences. The body remembers the voltage. You said something trivial. She laughed. But the laughter wasn't about humor. It was about relief. Relief is stored deeper than memory. Each time you returned, the body recognized the same release. And each time you left, it waited for the next drop. This is emotional memory. The invisible diary of the skin. It doesn't record events. It records sensations. Warmth, tension, anticipation, silence. The mind builds stories to explain these sensations. But the stories are just subtitles. The real script runs in the veins. That is why when you leave, she doesn't replay the words. She relives the heartbeat. Not the conversation, but the current that passed through her when you looked and said nothing. It was never about what you gave. It was about what she felt emerge inside herself because of your gravity. You became the trigger for her own depth. That is the illusion. She believes she's addicted to you, but she's addicted to herself in your presence. When you were near, her mind went quiet. Doubt dissolved for a second. In that silence, she met a version of herself she thought she had lost. Alive, wanted, radiant. You did not create that version. You only unlocked it. But the mind confuses the key with the door. So when you vanish, she doesn't crave you. She craves the chemical you represent. That rush of dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, all tangled like threads of the same web. The body cannot distinguish between love and withdrawal. It only knows stimulation and the absence of it. That's why after you leave, everything reminds her of you. The smell of rain, the vibration of her phone, a song she never liked before, but now can't skip. Each cue sends a signal. The source of this feeling once existed. The brain, desperate for continuity, begins to rebuild you out of fragments. A face from memory, a voice from imagination, a ghost wearing your scent. And that ghost becomes more real than you ever were. This is the moment she starts to confuse imagination with presence. Neurons fire as if you were still there. Her body releases the same chemicals as if you had just touched her hand. The memory becomes an active drug, and every replay strengthens the circuit. In psychology, this is called the consolidation of emotional memory. It's why trauma lasts and why love never feels like it dies. It simply changes form. The imprint does not fade. It waits. It waits beneath new faces, beneath new words, beneath new attempts to start over until one small pattern, a pause, a tone, a look, awakens the old code again. You are not in her thoughts by choice. You are there because her nervous system has carved a neural path in your shape. And the path doesn't disappear when she walks away. It only grows over with time, waiting for the next man to step in the same footprints. That's why some men feel familiar to her instantly. They echo your energy without meaning to. A phrase, a posture, a rhythm, and suddenly her body remembers something her mind swore it forgot. She tells herself, I've known him forever. But it isn't him. It's you written into her reflexes. When you understand this, you stop confusing emotional connection with emotional conditioning. Connection fades when distance grows. Conditioning lasts because the brain mistakes intensity for meaning. She doesn't love you for who you are. She is bound to the chemical state you awakened. And the cruel truth is that the body cannot distinguish between pain and passion when both make the heart race. That's why the relationships that hurt the most are the hardest to leave. Pain keeps the imprint alive. It is a perverse preservation. The mind clings to suffering because suffering proves the story still matters. If she stops hurting, she must admit it's over. So, she doesn't stop. She keeps the wound open. She calls it closure. You see it in her messages, the long essays explaining, blaming, forgiving, looping. Those are not attempts to communicate. They are rituals to maintain the chemical link. Writing about you keeps her in contact with the feeling of you. Deleting you would mean deleting herself. So, she doesn't. Every time she speaks your name, the imprint hums. Every time she imagines you listening, her pulse answers. The body becomes the stage where the ghost performs. And here lies the paradox. The more she tries to forget, the deeper the memory embeds because trying requires attention. And attention is the nutrient memory feeds on. The female psyche is both memory and meaning intertwined. Jung would call this the anima's dance. The inner feminine projection seeking reunion with her own lost wholeness. Freud would reduce it to repetition compulsion. The need to replay what once gave pleasure even when it causes pain. Nietzsche would name it the eternal recurrence. The spirit returning to the same fire believing each time it will not burn. Different philosophers, same pattern. The emotional imprint is not just stored in her brain. It is stored in her identity. Who she was when she met you becomes the reference point for who she tries to be after you. Every step forward is measured against the feeling you evoked. Every man she meets must compete with a chemical ghost. That is why she may date again and again yet claim no one compares. Comparison is not about compatibility. It is about replication. She's searching for the same internal weather. The thunder you left behind. Even anger cannot erase it. In fact, anger keeps it alive because to hate is still to feel and feeling is still connection. Hatred is the final disguise of longing. And as long as she needs to hate you, she's still feeding the imprint. The only cure for an emotional imprint is absence so complete that the pattern loses fuel. Time alone does not heal. Emptiness does. Because emptiness forces the nervous system to reprogram. At first, it resists. It screams. It bargains. It builds illusions. But eventually, the body gets tired of waiting for a stimulus that never comes. And that exhaustion becomes rebirth. If you understand this, you also understand why you hold so much power. Not because you control her, but because you triggered a system that she cannot easily override. You are not a god. You are a switch. And the switch was flipped in a moment neither of you recognized as sacred. A glance, a silence, a goodbye that wasn't meant to last. In the language of biology, that's all it takes, one association between pleasure and uncertainty stored with emotional intensity. And the imprint becomes law. Her body obeys it long after her logic rebels. When she dreams of you, it's not you. It's the imprint replaying itself to keep the loop intact. When she blocks you, it's not closure. It's withdrawal. The chemical system cutting its own supply. That's why blocking hurts her more than you. Because the signal disappears and the brain has nothing left to chase. You were never her type. You became her pattern. And patterns are harder to erase than people. That's why she can describe your eyes, but not your words. Why she remembers the feeling of waiting more vividly than the feeling of arrival. Why she can't explain to anyone what made you different. Because difference isn't seen, it's felt. You are an emotion disguised as a memory. And emotions do not die, they transform. Soon the transformation will begin. The chemical high will fade, and the void will speak louder. That void is not punishment. It is recalibration. But to her, it will feel like death. Because the imprint was never about you. It was about her reflection in you. And now that the mirror is gone, she must learn to see herself without it. That's the cruel mercy of this process. She will curse you for it. But it's the only way she becomes whole again. Until then, she will mistake craving for love, withdrawal for destiny, pain for proof. Because the mind would rather suffer than feel nothing. So remember this truth. She doesn't crave you. She craves the chemical you represent. You were the vessel through which she met herself. And once that realization dawns, the game changes for both of you. But when that chemical bond breaks, something else begins to rise. A silence that tastes different. A space that used to belong to you, but now belongs to her awakening. And with that awakening comes the next stage of the loop. The withdrawal effect, where absence becomes noise and silence becomes addiction. Part 3, the withdrawal effect. The more she tries to detach, the deeper the hook sinks. At first, she thinks it's over. She tells herself she's done. She deletes the messages, erases the photos, blocks the number. But detachment isn't an act of will. It's a biological war. And the mind never loses quietly. When dopamine falls, the brain behaves like a starving animal. Every cell that once sang in your presence now begins to scream for its fix. Pain, emptiness, confusion, not emotions, but withdrawals. You were the source, and now the supply is gone. What she feels next isn't heartbreak. It's chemical collapse. You can see it in her eyes. The restless flicker, the sudden silences that swallow her laughter halfway. The body remembers stimulation long after logic declares peace. Each second without your signal becomes static. And that static turns into craving. Craving doesn't ask for love. It asks for relief. Relief from the ache of absence. From the hollow pulse that once was rhythm. The female brain, conditioned by contrast, begins to chase the very thing that caused the pain. Not because she wants you, but because your absence is unbearable. You were her emotional high. Now you are her detox. And the irony is cruel. The more she fights to free herself, the more her mind binds to the object of withdrawal. She dreams of you at night, not as a man, but as a phantom touch. Her body flinches in sleep, reaching for something that isn't there. Every morning, she wakes with a whisper of loss that feels like gravity. You have become a weight she can't drop, because to drop it would mean facing the silence underneath. When the high fades, the void begins to echo. It calls your name without words. She opens her phone not to write, just to feel the faint electric hum of possibility. Her heart races at nothing. This is not romance. This is the nervous system clawing its way back to balance. In neuroscience, this stage is brutal. Dopamine withdrawal mirrors grief. The brain releases cortisol, adrenaline, stress hormones that blur thought and tighten breath. She becomes addicted to the idea of closure. But closure is a myth. There is no ending that feels like peace to a system wired for repetition. There is only exhaustion. And exhaustion, when mixed with longing, breeds obsession. That is why she will keep checking, not to see if you wrote, but to keep the circuit alive. Each glance is a microdose of pain disguised as hope. Each second of waiting releases just enough dopamine to keep her from collapsing. The pattern sustains itself like a dying star burning its last light. Her friends will tell her to move on. They will offer distractions, new faces, soft words. But the brain cannot replace intensity with comfort. Comfort feels numb. She doesn't want numb. She wants the chaos she mistook for passion. She wants the storm she once called love. You became that storm. And now she searches for thunder in quiet skies. When you disappear, she starts hearing her own void echo your name. Because silence doesn't stay silent in the addicted mind. It amplifies. It grows until every room hums with invisible noise. The sound of missing. Missing is not an emotion. It's a reflex, an involuntary tightening around the shape of what's gone. Each attempt to escape strengthens the bond. Resistance is attention. Attention feeds the loop. This is why some women stay trapped for years in the memory of a man they barely knew. It's not nostalgia, it's chemical loyalty. Think of it this way. When she tries to forget, she must think of forgetting you. And thinking of forgetting you is thinking of you. The mind folds in on itself. A serpent swallowing its own tail. Even hate becomes nourishment. Hate is just love inverted. A way to keep the energy alive by turning it sharp. She'll curse your name, dissect your flaws, replay every moment you failed her, but each thought still burns the same candle. Hatred keeps you warm in her psyche. It keeps you alive. You can vanish from her life and still occupy her nervous system because memory isn't stored like files in a drawer. It's stored like grooves on vinyl. Each emotion carving its pattern deeper with every replay. And once the groove is deep enough, the song plays itself. Now imagine what happens when the music stops. The silence isn't peaceful. It's deafening. She walks through her days hearing echoes of what used to fill her. Every place feels smaller. Every conversation too flat because her perception of reality has been stretched by emotional intensity. And normality now feels like withdrawal. This is the stage where she begins bargaining. She tells herself, maybe I overreacted. Maybe he wasn't that bad. Maybe I should reach out. That isn't forgiveness. It's the addict negotiating with pain. The mind always rationalizes the return to what once hurt it because the return promises a temporary end to craving. Even her pride becomes porous. The woman who once said she'd never chase now rewrites her own boundaries. She checks your last scene. She imagines you with someone else. And that imagination becomes a weapon she turns inward. Jealousy replaces logic. Fear replaces reason. Her dignity dissolves under the acid of longing. And yet underneath the chaos, something quieter begins to stir. Awareness, a faint recognition that this isn't love anymore. It's dependency. But the mind cannot quit by realization alone. Understanding is the seed. Detachment is the harvest. And between them lies pain. Withdrawal is not a punishment. It's purification. The body is learning to live without the stimulus that defined it. The heart trembles, not because it's weak, but because it's recalibrating. Every tear is data leaving the system. Every sleepless night is the nervous system rewriting its code. But she doesn't see that yet. She still believes that pain equals meaning, that the ache is proof of depth. So, she clings to the ache like it's holy. This is why she can't bear your silence, because silence forces her to face herself, unmirrored, unchosen, unvalidated. And for a woman who once existed in the glow of your attention, that is annihilation. She scrolls through old photos not to remember you, but to remember her, the version that smiled brighter, that felt alive, that belonged. Without that reflection, she begins to dissolve. So she reaches out, not to you, but to the echo of herself. You have become her doorway back to the woman she was. And closing that door feels like death. This is the paradox of the withdrawal effect. The only way to heal is to let die. But no one teaches the mind how to die without the body. So she lingers in half-life, a twilight of memory and illusion. She talks to friends about closure while secretly hoping for contact. She declares strength in public but collapses in solitude. She listens to songs she once hated because they hurt beautifully. Pain becomes the new intimacy and you even in absence remain the center of it. You are not there yet. Every motion revolves around you. You are not speaking yet every silence is filled with your voice. You have become both ghost and God. But remember this, she isn't worshipping you. She's worshipping the chemistry that you awakened. The same pattern that made her chase pleasure now makes her chase pain. It's all the same circuit. You were the stimulus. She was the storm. Now the storm rages without its sky. You might think she's strong enough to walk away. She might believe it, too. But the brain doesn't heal linearly. It loops. It teases. It tempts. One night, a scent, a song, a silence, and suddenly the craving returns with surgical precision. That's why even years later, your name can still tighten her throat. Memory never truly dies. It just sleeps beneath the skin. The more she tries to detach, the deeper the hook sinks. Because detachment through resistance is still attachment. Real detachment happens only when she stops fighting the void and begins to feel it. When she lets the emptiness speak instead of silencing it with substitutes. Only then does the nervous system start to accept the truth. There is no going back. And yet this is the doorway to transformation. Because somewhere inside the pain, the illusion begins to crack. She starts to see that what she's mourning is not love, but the loss of control she once mistook for connection. That moment, fragile, sacred, terrifying, is the beginning of the inversion, the pivot where addiction turns into fear, where craving becomes anxiety, where wanting you becomes dreading to lose the power to stop wanting you. That is the inversion point. And once she crosses it, nothing in the dynamic will ever be the same again. Part 4, the inversion point. She doesn't chase you because she wants you. She chases you because she can't stand losing control. This is where the gravity shifts. Where the power of emotion crosses its axis. And what once pulled her toward pleasure now drags her toward fear. Until now, everything was addiction. She chased the high. She chased the chemical, the echo, the memory. But at the inversion point, the game reverses. Addiction turns into anxiety. Desire mutates into dread. Love becomes a war against powerlessness. When you stop reacting, the script collapses. You cease to be the stimulus she can manipulate for dopamine. You stop being the predictable response inside her equation. The loop breaks. And in the silence that follows, she feels something she cannot name. The terror of losing control over the story. She once believed she knew her role. The woman desired. The woman chased. The woman adored. Her worth was written in your reaction. Every message, every glance, every small concession reaffirmed the illusion that she mattered. Now with your stillness, that mirror disappears. And without reflection, identity begins to unravel. She doesn't miss you. She misses the version of herself who could control how you felt. The woman who could make you reach out, who could draw you back with a sigh, who could press a button called attention and watch you appear. Now she presses the same button and nothing happens. Silence. Emptiness. This is the moment her confidence collapses into compulsion. The inversion point is not about you walking away. It's about you not moving at all. Because stillness is unbearable to the addicted mind. Stillness exposes dependency. Stillness reveals that all the noise was a disguise for imbalance. When you remain unmoved, she begins to orbit. She becomes restless, unpredictable, emotional. Not because she loves you, but because her nervous system demands the restoration of control. It's not affection that drives her actions now, it's survival. Her mind equates the loss of control with the loss of self. So, she must chase, not to win you back, but to stop herself from disintegrating. You've become the axis. She spins around you, not out of attraction, but necessity. Each attempt to re-engage you is a subconscious effort to re-enter her own emotional gravity. Every time she provokes, tests, or tempts, she's not reaching for love. She's reaching for balance. That's why her behavior changes. She becomes both cold and desperate. Detached yet invasive. One day she withdraws entirely. The next she explodes. The brain caught between craving and pride oscillates violently, hoping something will shake you into reacting. But you don't. You hold your axis. You remain calm, still, deliberate. And in that stillness, her illusion of control begins to dissolve. The man she once thought she understood now becomes a mystery. And mystery to the female mind is gravity. She cannot leave what she cannot define. The absence of clarity becomes its own addiction. Here's the paradox. The more you resist being pulled into her emotional chaos, the stronger her chaos pulls toward you. Because control cannot coexist with uncertainty. And yet, uncertainty is the only thing that makes her feel alive. She begins to reframe the story. At first, she tells herself, "You're heartless." Then that you're testing her, finally that you must still care because no one who didn't care could stay that calm. Each explanation keeps the illusion intact. You're still in her narrative, but in truth, she's no longer in yours. You have transcended reaction, and that is the ultimate shift in power. Every dynamic between a man and a woman lives on a polarity of response. Who reacts, loses ground, who remains still, becomes the gravitational center. Not by dominance, not by aggression, but by possession of self. The man who can stay silent in uncertainty holds infinite leverage. Because his stillness forces her to face her own reflection, the reflection she's been avoiding all along. Now the mirror shows her something she cannot unsee, her own dependency, her own fear, her own inability to feel stable without external validation. That realization burns. And yet the burn is sacred. For the first time, she realizes she isn't chasing love. She's chasing equilibrium. She isn't trying to win you. She's trying to win herself back. But she doesn't yet understand that those are different things. When you were reactive, she was safe because every emotion she released found a place to land. Every test met resistance. Every silence provoked a reply. You confirmed her power through your reactions. Now that feedback loop is gone. She screams into the void and the void does not answer. So she begins to implode. Her thoughts spiral inward. Why isn't he responding? Has he stopped caring? Did I lose him? Was I ever that important? These questions don't seek truth. They seek stimulation. Anything to replace the unbearable quiet inside her. Because silence is not neutral to the addicted mind. Silence is confrontation. It strips away every illusion of control and exposes what was always true. She never controlled you. She controlled her perception of you. At the inversion point, perception collapses. The story she told herself no longer makes sense. And when stories collapse, the ego panics. Ego cannot survive uncertainty. So, it rebuilds narratives to feel safe again. That's why she suddenly tries to make peace. Why she reaches out just to talk. Why she apologizes, then blames, then confesses, then withdraws again. It's not strategy, it's survival instinct. She's not communicating. She's recalibrating, testing where the edges of her influence still exist. This is the precise moment most men lose the game because they mistake panic for sincerity. They mistake her vulnerability for transformation. And in an attempt to comfort her, they give back the control she's trying to lose. They reassure, they explain, they prove, and the cycle resets. Don't do that. Don't feed the ghost. The inversion point is sacred because it reveals the truth beneath attraction. It was never about you being irresistible. It was about her needing to feel in control. You were the canvas. She was the painter. And now that you've stopped providing lines for her to draw within, she must confront the blank space. That's what she fears most. Not rejection, not loss, but emptiness. Because emptiness demands self-definition. And self-definition means stepping out of illusion. When you stay still, you force that confrontation. You don't chase, you don't explain, you don't perform empathy as transaction. You simply exist, grounded, silent, unmoved, and your silence becomes the ultimate mirror. Through it, she finally sees the truth. She doesn't desire you. She desires what she feels when she's able to affect you. When that power disappears, she doesn't lose love. She loses her illusion of control. And that illusion was her drug. She chases now, not because she loves, but because she can't bear to feel powerless. You have become the fixed point around which her chaos orbits. The only stable presence in a system that has lost all internal gravity. The paradox deepens. The more you refuse to engage, the more meaning she assigns to you. She confuses your detachment for depth, your stillness for mystery, your calm for dominance. The female psyche turns absence into narrative, and narrative becomes devotion. But this devotion is brittle. It is built on imbalance. She is not loving you. She is resisting the collapse of her own identity. That's why even when she clings, she hates you for it. Even when she reaches out, she resents your calm. Even as she desires you, she wants to destroy what you represent. The reminder that her power was never real. And so, her chase becomes self-destruction disguised as romance. Every message she sends that you don't answer tightens the loop. Every hour you remain silent multiplies the intensity of her thoughts. Each unanswered question turns into proof of your power. But understand this, your power is not over her. Your power is mastery over yourself. You've stopped reacting. You've stopped needing to be understood. And in that moment, you cease to be a participant in her story. You become the observer, the axis, the gravity she orbits around. Stillness is not cruelty. Stillness is clarity. It separates love from illusion, connection from control. When you remain still, you allow her to face what she's been running from, the raw truth that her sense of worth was external. Now stripped of reaction, she must look inward for the first time. That's when transformation becomes possible. But it's not your job to guide it. You cannot heal her. She must walk through the fire herself. If you reach out now, you will rob her of the very pain that forces growth. This is where most men fail by trying to rescue her from the collapse. They mistake the destruction of her illusion for suffering caused by them. But the truth is, she's not hurting because of you. She's hurting because the illusion is dying. And when illusions die, the self that depended on them screams. So let her scream. Let her hate you. Let her think you're cold, heartless, unbothered. Because in time, she'll understand. It was never cruelty. It was consequence. Every reaction she once commanded was a form of control. Now with your silence, she meets the reality of power. This is where the alchemy happens. Where the energy that once fueled her addiction begins to implode into awakening. Where fear turns into awareness. Where the hunter realizes she's been chasing her own shadow. If you can hold your axis through that chaos, you transcend her narrative completely. You no longer exist as a player in her emotional game. You become the structure around which she learns to rebuild herself. The inversion point is the moment she stops chasing love and starts confronting the void within. And when that happens, she may finally see you not as her salvation, but as the mirror that revealed her wound. This is where most men lose the game. By trying to reassure her instead of staying still, because reassurance reactivates the pattern. Stillness ends it. When you hold your axis long enough, something extraordinary happens. The storm calms, not because she won, but because she surrendered. She realizes the fight was never with you. It was with herself. And in that silence, for the first time, truth appears. You were never her enemy. You were never her obsession. You were the mirror that cracked so she could finally see her own reflection. And when that truth settles, the energy that once chained her to you will free her. And it will free you, too. Because only when the illusion collapses does love, real, unpossessed, unperformed, have the space to exist. That is the gift of the inversion point. And that is where the game ends and consciousness begins. When you stop being her source of validation, you become her mirror. And in that reflection, she doesn't see you. She sees everything she lost. That is the final shift, the end of the loop, the collapse of illusion. Because from the very beginning, it was never about love. It was about recognition. The way she felt seen through your gaze, the way she felt powerful through your attention. You were not her salvation. You were her stage. Her identity performed itself in your reflection. And every reaction you gave was proof of existence. But now you've stopped reacting. You've become still, silent, untouchable. And in that stillness, she meets something far more terrifying than your absence, she meets herself. You see, most men think the end of a relationship is the moment she walks away. It's not. The real ending begins when you withdraw your validation. When you no longer rise to her moods, her tests, her silence, when your presence ceases to confirm her importance. That's when the gravity reverses. She looks at you expecting to find the same man. The one who reached, explained, tried. But now there's no movement, no reaction, no reflection of her control. And in that void, she doesn't lose you. She loses the mirror that defined her. That is the cruel mercy of your stillness. Because what she sees now is not rejection, but revelation. She realizes that the love she thought she had was never between two souls. It was between her ego and its favorite mirror. She thought she wanted the man. What she wanted was the reflection of power in his eyes. She thought she loved his mystery. What she loved was her ability to solve it. She thought she missed him. What she missed was the feeling of control. You don't destroy her illusion by confrontation. You destroy it by absence. Because absence is truth unwrapped. Every word you don't say becomes a mirror. Every boundary you don't negotiate becomes a reflection. Every silence you hold forces her to confront the one reality she avoided. That her validation was never love. It was leverage. When she realizes this, the pain is unbearable. Because what dies isn't the relationship. It's the identity built upon it. The woman she was when she could make you move, make you doubt, make you chase, that woman no longer exists. And she grieves not the loss of you, but the death of her illusion. That's why even in the aftermath, she will keep looking into your silence, hoping to see a flicker of the old reflection, hoping you'll react one more time. Because one reaction would mean she still exists in your world, but your stillness gives her nothing. Only the echo of herself. And that echo grows louder until it breaks her. This is the moment men misunderstand most. They see her pain and rush to comfort it. They interpret her sorrow as a call for reconciliation. They believe she wants them, but she doesn't. She wants to escape the mirror. She wants relief from her own reflection. If you give in now, you resurrect the illusion. You bring her ego back to life and the cycle begins again. But if you hold your axis, if you remain unmoved, you become something else entirely. Not her drug, but her detox. That's the paradox of masculine power. You do not win by chasing. You do not conquer by convincing. You win by dissolving her illusion in the silence of your certainty. Not certainty in her, certainty in yourself. Because when your validation dies, hers must be born. When she no longer receives her worth from your gaze, she is forced to seek it within. And that is the beginning of her awakening. It feels like punishment, but it's liberation. It's the first step toward a love that isn't built on control. And you are the catalyst of that transformation. Not through teaching but through presence. Not through action but through non-reaction. You have become the mirror of consequence. You show her the cost of manipulation, the emptiness of dependency, the futility of control. Your silence reflects her addiction. Your detachment exposes her illusion. Your stillness becomes her teacher. And one day when the noise inside her quiets, she will look at you and finally understand you were never the villain. You were the lesson. That is the emotional payoff. Not victory, not revenge, but clarity. Because power, once seen clearly, ceases to intoxicate. You no longer crave to win her back. You no longer need to prove your worth. You see the pattern for what it was. A cycle of validation disguised as love. And by seeing it, you step outside of it. You are free. She too begins to shift. Her obsession fades, not because she chooses to let go, but because the loop no longer feeds her. Your silence has starved it. The illusion withers when it finds no reaction to sustain it. Now in the final phase, everything becomes quiet. You are no longer the axis she orbits. You are the sky she must learn to navigate without a compass. She might resent you for it. But beneath that resentment is respect, because the soul always recognizes truth. Even when the ego hates it. When you stop being her source of validation, you become her mirror. And in that mirror, she doesn't see you. She sees everything she lost. Her control, her certainty, her illusion of self. And maybe beneath all that, she glimpses something pure. Herself, unmasked. That is the awakening you were meant to ignite. Not through love, but through loss. Not through holding her hand, but through letting go. Because some mirrors do not comfort. They shatter the false so that the real can be born. And when the real emerges, she will finally understand what you understood long before. That obsession was never connection and control was never love. That freedom begins where reaction ends. So let her see it. Let her feel the silence. Let her meet herself in the void you left behind. Because that void is not cruelty. It's truth. And truth once felt changes everything. Now you stand at the threshold between knowledge and mastery. You've seen how attraction turns into addiction, how addiction turns into fear, how fear collapses into awakening. The circle is complete. You don't need to chase. You don't need to prove. You don't even need to win, because understanding itself is victory. And when a man understands, he no longer plays the game. He reads its design. He no longer fights for power. He becomes the axis of it. He no longer asks, what does she feel? He asks, what energy do I allow? That shift changes everything. You move from participant to principle, from reaction to gravity, from confusion to command. And that command isn't dominance. It's peace. Peace that doesn't flinch when she tests. Peace that doesn't waver when she withdraws. Peace that doesn't break when she begs for attention or disappears to provoke a chase. Because peace doesn't react. It observes. It holds. It waits. And in that waiting, she either rises to meet it or fades into the noise of her own illusions. You will have no bitterness left. Only clarity, only understanding, only stillness. That is where true power lives, not in control, but in consciousness. You don't end the cycle by punishing her. You end it by mastering yourself. By no longer feeding the emotional economy that keeps both of you enslaved. When you stop trading validation, the game collapses. And what remains is truth. Truth is simple. It doesn't seduce. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't chase. It simply stands. Unmoved, unbothered, unafraid. That's who you become when you understand all of this. The man who no longer plays to be loved but lives to embody gravity. Because in the end, you were never meant to be the storm. You were meant to be the calm that reveals it. And when she looks into that calm, what she truly sees is not you, but herself without illusion. That's the final mirror. When you stop being her source of validation, you become her mirror. And in that reflection, she doesn't see you. She sees everything she lost, and maybe for the first time everything she can now become. In the next video, we'll go deeper into the mirror effect, where your silence becomes her obsession, where stillness becomes your weapon, and where she finally learns the one truth no one ever told her. That love begins not with desire, but with the reflection of who you become when you no longer need to be desired.